Maybe there's a volume. Hey, there's a volume something here.
Does that help at all?
Let's see. Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
That helps a little.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So.
And maybe I can turn it up just a little bit now. Does that help?
Yeah, this helps.
Okay.
Yeah, this is much better.
Lasse Lundeberg?
Yeah, Lars Lundeberg. Lasse is a nickname, yeah.
Okay. And so should I call you Lasse or Lars?
I think Lars is easier in English.
Okay. And
Lasse, isn't that a nickname for girlfriend in Scottish or something? Or?
Yeah, Lassie, the dog. Yeah.
I'm trying to stay away from that.
Okay. So Lars.
No big deal.
Yeah, everybody knows Lars is a good masculine. Okay. And interesting. You've worked in the U.S. in radio.
Yeah.
They
couldn't find anybody else.
Okay. No.
Where in the U.S. did you work?
In California, in Ridgecrest. It's a small desert town close to Canada.
LA?
Yeah, about 1 hour, well, maybe 2 hours north of LA.
Palm Springs?
No, it's inland. It's in the desert.
So what topics would you like to talk about? You heard some of the things I brought up with Rick. I'd like to go over some of the same territory again if you're up for it.
Yeah. I've been I get interested in modernism.
Okay.
You know, the culture war between modernism and conservative people coming here from the Middle East.
Okay. I had a pen. I don't know what happened to it.
It's running away.
Oh, here.
Okay. So pass that to Louise. So the culture wars.
Yeah. Because where I live now, we have a large immigrant community, and for the last maybe 10 years, I've been kind of learning that we got some nationalistic movements in Sweden. Yeah. Swedes, of course, but then the immigrants coming from older cultures, they have a lot in common with some of the nationalistic movements all over Europe and in America. But then you got the modernistic world, of course. So I'm kind of fascinated in trying to understand those things.
And you've lived in the United States, and worked in the United States for over a decade, and you've also, and you're a Swede. Right. And so I'm curious about your thoughts on our social welfare programs versus the Swedish social welfare programs, and how they've worked for this country throughout your lifetime.
Right.
And where they're going and things. So we can talk about that too.
Definitely.
Give a comparative analysis from somebody who's actually been in both places. Okay,
absolutely,
Good. Lundeberg?
Yeah, Lundeberg, yeah.
Lundeberg.
Lasse, berätta också, du startade egentligen 2 radiostationer.
Jaha.
Det kan vara intressant också.
What is the biggest political topic in Sweden?
If you ask me, I have an answer. If you ask some other, they have other.
What do you think it is?
I think this about
it is. That's right.
internet and the printing press. You have to compare internet like the printing press, Gutenberg.
Aaron Milkovich?
You can only use Gagarin, or whatever. Use whatever what you think it. Yeah. And I don't hear people so much talk about the process.
I want to thank you on the air.
At the beginning, for 500 years ago,
yes, Jacob.
The people in power don't like printing press.
Right.
And the same thing is happening again. What are they scared about? Okay, power, but what's wrong with it? With more information.
Yeah.
How's that?
We've been arresting.
I think you and Thom have to talk much more about it on your shows. Thom talk about sometime, but you have to imprint it. I don't know how you should do it, but you have to find out.
Yeah.
But if you compare with printing press, I think people a little bit more understand how important it is. Now I think it is something that children do. If the SOPA get through, if they could cut Thom from air.
Yeah. We talk about SOPA a lot. We talk about it, probably, we have a lot of guests on it about the TV show as well.
Yeah.
And they have changed the name on it to Open.
That was.
Yeah, that's called soap, but it called the new name is Open.
Yes, I know.
It sounds much
The conservatives are very
good.
good at creating doing
Do some screening,
in America
10 minutes
when Bush
or locks
cut
out
down
for security.
all the
So if I'm doing other things while you're talking, just keep on talking.
the Democrats are awful at naming things.
Infuriating.
That's true. Doesn't they learn anything from older failures? I mean, when they're naming things.
We constantly talk to them, to the Democrats, about how they name things.
And welcome back to a very jet-lagged Thom Hartmann here, broadcasting live from Stockholm, Sweden, and actually the suburb of Nacka. Radio Nacka, 99.9 megahertz, simulcasting our signal in Stockholm and surrounding areas in Nacka and whatnot. And special thanks to Gagarin Milkovic, who's helping organize all of this, and our friends at Silver Lake Audio in the United States, who are helping organize the audio, and everybody else. It's just fascinating. And I wanted to bring in this hour, we're going to get back to American politics as well at the bottom of the hour. And so if you have calls or thoughts on, where this is all going with Newt and all these kinds of things, just stick around. But for a little bit, being here, Sweden is the epicenter of so many things. And I think of Sweden and Iceland as the economic epicenters of what's going on, frankly, worldwide over the short and long term, and cultural changes as well. And Lasse Lundeberg is with us. Lars is a commentator on Swedish and American politics. He's on radio here, radiolars.com is his website. But he also lived in the United States for over a decade with a green card and worked there in radio and television, and so has the extraordinary and unique ability to, as a journalist and talk show host and commentator and resident of both countries, to add some thoughts on them. And Lars, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So very pleased to have you with us. First of all, you said that you've been spending a lot of time looking at the culture wars, both here in Sweden and in the United States. You saw this, and the right and the racists and the xenophobes, and what's going on here? What's going on in the rest of Europe, and how does it relate to what's going on in America?
Oh, that's what I'm trying to understand. Well, Sweden is a very modern country. When it comes to social things,
very modern.
Very modern, yeah, extremely modern. America, of course, is more traditional or conservative.
But how, if I may, just push back on that. It seems to me that Sweden, a lot of Swedes are, they're very reserved. This is the way we always did it. I mean, I lived in Germany for a year in the 80s, and I was astounded at how often the answer to any question was, "We've always done it this way." And I've certainly heard that in Sweden. And there's, systems, we make change incremental and slow. So how would you say it's modern because it's technologically modern?
Well, I'd say it's very collective. We're used to, the old culture of Sweden is everybody's following everybody, so everybody has to do the same.
We're all in it together.
Yeah, it's the flip side of equality, that everybody has to act the same, stay the same, and live the same, and being ruled, and everybody follows. I guess Germany is very much like that, which of course can be a bad thing, but this changes very quickly now because we got a lot of immigration coming in, people from other cultures, and the reason for Sweden being very modern, I think, is because it's been ruled that way. Our leaders have been wanting it to be very modern. And if the leaders are elected by the people, I mean, you have a king here, but
not so much. So your leaders are the politicians, and so they're reflecting the will of the people. Or are they bought off by the billionaires?
That's an idea.
Yeah, which is it? Is it really that they're reflecting the will of the people?
Not really. It's in America you got lobbyists. Here, the ruling people of Sweden, the people in power and the richest people, a very, very good hold of the politicians.
Mm.
But the funny thing about Sweden is you don't talk much about that. It's not something that's been talked about or whatever. I can give you a quick example. The tax laws of Sweden maybe a couple of decades ago made a poor little carpenter. He had hired a subcontractor, and the subcontractor didn't have his paper in order, so this carpenter had to pay a lot of taxes and almost got wiped out of business because the tax laws told him you're responsible for the people you hire.
Sure.
But to make a long story short, so this was an outrage. Some papers were read up, and it was an outrage. And then the Minister of Finance said, "Okay, come into my office." And this carpenter came into the Minister of Finance office, and the Minister of Finance called the tax authorities, the IRS, and fixed it.
Wow.
And everybody said, "Hey, that's a good thing." But of course, that's terrible. I mean, the ministers shouldn't go in and rule in particular small cases, and like thousands of other carpenters.
If you have problems that are systemic, they should be fixed systemically.
Yeah, by the law. That's
Yes.
a good idea. Of course, our king is above the law technically, so the king of Sweden doesn't have to follow the law.
Yeah.
So the good thing about Sweden is everybody's very peaceful. People don't riot and fight, but everybody follows what you're supposed to do, what the leaders tell you to do. So it's right for being run by the big guys. So, which is
so
the downside.
So the little guys, the immigrants, the people who are visibly not ancestrally Swedish, people of color, people who maybe are third or fourth generation even immigrants, but they're people of color. There's a political party here that would like them all kicked out.
Yeah.
And Pat Buchanan in the United States, a right-wing American commentator, I remember hearing a speech when he was running for president some 15 years or more ago, where he was basically talking about those people in the banking, which was obvious Buchanan code for the Jews, and those people who are on welfare, which was obvious Buchanan code for African Americans, even though more white people are on welfare than African Americans in the United States. And he just lost a big job because he wrote a book in which he has a chapter called "The End of White America."
Oh, the last book's
Yeah. And so we have this in the United States. You have this here. How's it doing here? What's the situation with this xenophobia, racism, whatever you call it?
Well, I guess it started out, back after World War II. There were a bunch of Nazis or neo-Nazis hanging on and building. Well, they were really small, but they kind of formed and built sort of an anti-immigrant party. But their basis is also conservatism or against modernism. They're really against the modernistic society.
So they're true conservatives in the Edmund Burke sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Keep society the way it was when Dickens was around.
Yeah. Interesting though, a lot of immigrants also are very conservative. A lot of immigrants, especially, I talked to a lot of Muslims who are, they're split, but a lot of them are against the modern society.
In other words, they don't. They think something like gay marriage is a bad idea.
Exactly. Yes. So and then of course, but not all. There's a lot of Muslims coming here want to emulate the Western world, but some don't. So there's a struggle going on. So yeah, that's the old sort of called neo-Nazi movement that you've seen all over the world. But then they have changed. Then they're split into two parts, because usually the neo-Nazis, they hate the Jews because they think the Jews is the root of all evil in the whole world, and they're racist. They really believe in race, literally, not just like a slur, but race is everything. But the new anti-immigrant parties of Sweden and Denmark and some European countries, they don't talk about race. They're actually literally not racist. It's not just that they're trying to play nice. No, they're not racist. And they don't hate the Jews. So it's like a huge split in that movement.
So what are they, classists? Or what's... Classists. Well, they're still sort of conservative, but not as conservative as... So they just want to throw society back 70 years, that's all.
That's a good point, yeah, because the Social Democrats ran Sweden forever, for many, many years. That's been the biggest party. And the anti-immigrant party that got into the Swedish parliament recently, Sverigedemokraterna, they're like the Social Democrats were in like the 70s, the 60s or 70s. and the neo-Nazis, they're like the Social Democrats who are in like the 30s and 40s.
Fascinating.
So both want to go back.
So in our last hour, we had a representative of the Pirate Party.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is, which is kind of the other end. This is fascinating. And I'd like to get into with you a conversation, Lars, about the whole situation with social democracies. What does it mean to be a democratic socialist in Sweden, or words to that effect, right after this break.
Okay.
Thom Hartmann here, broadcasting live from Stockholm, Sweden. Our guest Lars Lundeberg, and more with him, and then we'll be picking up your calls and back to American politics. Yep, I just remembered. And welcome back, Thom Hartmann here with you, and Lars Lundeberg is with me, and Lars. The situation. We just take this immigrant situation just a little bit farther, because I'm not sure that I really understood what you just said.
Okay, about the split.
Yeah, about the split.
Okay.
I understand the people who are the racists. Everybody knows.
And
somebody,
and
the anti-Semites.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that, or they've read about it, or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
And we've certainly seen the consequences of it writ large with World War II, and arguably forever, nations invading other nations and killing people. But the people who are aligning themselves with them and call themselves conservatives, what do they really want?
Are you talking about the second immigrant wave, or?
No, I mean the second group of Swedes who are aligning themselves with the racists, but they're not really racist.
Oh, okay. They're basically against Muslims. It used to be that the old neo-Nazis...
So they're religious. Pardon my interruption.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's against... Well, yeah, in a way. But no, they're not racist. They're not anti-Semite anymore. They're actually Zionist and pro-Israel. So that's a huge shift. You're talking, anti or for the Jewish state, or anti or for race. So it's a really big shift. But anyway, instead of just hate all immigrants, now they hate Islam and Muslims the most, and they welcome Christian immigrants, especially from countries where Muslims and Christians have been at odds with each other. So they kind of welcome people coming in who also hate Muslims from other countries. I'm talking about the party that got into the Swedish parliament recently with something like, 5-6% of the votes, or what.
Party is named
Sverigedemokraterna, the Sweden Democrats, which is the basic group. And the other part, the true neo-Nazis, they're more left out in the cold. They're still there, but they're very few. I think their party, the biggest party, got something like 1,200 votes in the last election. Sweden has something like 9 million people.
So there's not much there.
There's not much there, but I started following these guys maybe 9 years ago. I read everything on the internet, and I subscribed to one of their newsletters. And I try to understand everything about them, and I thought I should grow tired of that story for, after 3 or 4 years. But it's fascinating to watch a group that sees yourself, or you see society from the outside. I was born and raised in Sweden. I lived for 10 years in the States, which means I saw the United States from the outside, and I was there for 10 or 12 years. And I started to see Sweden from the outside. So it's really fascinating to learn and watch how other people see your things. And I spent all my time working in radio and TV with a lot of journalists. And the neo-Nazis, both anti-immigrant groups, they really hate journalists. So I get their view on the media and on everything. Also, Sweden used to have a really strong communist or really leftist parties, several of them. And some of those ideas from the old left, from like the 50s and 60s, all the way from the 30s and the 50s, 60s, are now being taken over by those neo-Nazis. And what I sense in my, my nose is picking up, I think those neo-Nazis are going to grow, and I think a lot of the militant Muslims are going to grow, and they have some things in common. They hate the Jews, and they hate modernity.
We have to take a break. Oops, I forgot to begin. PC, so now keep active. Good. You gave me a second.
Yeah. Anyway.
We're back on. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, broadcasting live from Radio Nacka, 99.9 FM in Stockholm, or in Nacka, suburban Stockholm. And Gagarin Milkovic and all the good people here, Karen, thank you all for all your help and everything that you're doing. We're so pleased to be here. And to the good folks at Silver Lake Audio for helping make all this happen. So with me in the studio is Lars Lundeberg, who's has this unique perspective as somebody who has lived in the United States for over a decade, worked in the United States, and is a Swedish commentator, essentially a talk show host and commentator and journalist. RadioLars.com, his website. And Lars, just to summarize the conversation from the last segment, you said that the thing that this new group that has emerged, which is called the Swedish Democratic Party, but how do you say it in Swedish?
Sverigedemokraterna.
Sverigedemokraterna.
Yeah, close enough.
Okay. Yeah. That this party is they're not racists and they're not anti-Semites and they're not friends with the Nazis on those bases, but they are aligning themselves with the Nazis because they hate Muslims, and it's their hatred of Muslims, and then the other guys hate Jews and people of color, and so the two of them are getting together and saying, we're the people who hate people. Right? I find that incredible. Now, with regard to the United States and Sweden, Sweden is world famous for being a social democracy, a democratic socialist society, a society where from the moment you are born, arguably from the moment a woman is pregnant, until the moment you die, you never have to fear that some disaster, whether it's a car accident that disables you, or cancer, or whatever it may, or being born with some sort of a birth defect or something like that, you never have to worry that having that happen is going to wipe you out. In America, half of all bankruptcies happen from people who simply got sick, and half of those people were insured, and they still wiped them out. And then fully a third of bankruptcies in America are the result of women getting divorced and they don't have an independent income high enough to cover the bills that they have, the half of the bills that they walked out of the divorce with. None of that would ever happen here in Sweden. So what lessons does Sweden have for America, and how do the Swedes think about this? Looking at us, what do they think we're crazy, or do they think that we're maybe onto something, or what?
When you're born and raised with something, you don't appreciate it. So a lot of people just take it for granted, just like Rick said. Also, what I discovered or experienced in America was that life could change more quickly, and you had to be really responsible for your own life. So the good thing is that you feel that you're alive more, because you constantly have to. And also money. We can understand why Americans think so much about the dollar. Well, of course, you got to have those dollars, otherwise you're on the street.
Yeah.
And I imagine myself being on the streets, a couple of weeks after the next paycheck. So I could have that. I felt that feeling myself.
When you were in America?
Yeah, when I was in America, although it never happened. But I could feel that feeling. And sometimes I have to choose between, paying the rent or buying cans of food or whatever. And so when you don't have that. You can, sometimes maybe you don't live as close to reality, or maybe you start dreaming away, which is a good thing, because the thing about America is that everything is much tactical. You're more focused on the small nitty-gritty details in a moment. And the best thing about maybe Sweden is that, and some people coming from Russia, is that you have this luxury in a way of thinking the big thoughts. But you can't change your life that much. It used to be if you work real hard, they got to taxes, you didn't get much more money, although that's changed a little.
But Sweden doesn't have as many millionaires and billionaires relative to its population as most other countries. In fact, you only have a handful. And you don't have poor people here. I mean, desperately poor people.
No, not that much, no. So, in a way, the bad thing is you don't feel that you can change your life. You don't feel that you're in control
everybody's
of your life.
Stuck in the middle class.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I'm not trashing. I think it's very good.
Yeah.
And I think, of course, just like anybody can call the cops or the fire department, no matter how many times you burglarized, you should be able to go to get medical care no matter what. I think. Of course, there's a problem because good medical care is about how you live your life, what you eat, if you exercise, and you don't really want the government to tell you, what to eat or how to live your life. So there's a problem.
But with everybody paying for it, isn't there a social pressure not to smoke, not to become obese, not to,
Yeah, a little bit. There was a Swedish talk show who brought that up. Some callers called in and said that way. If they eat fatty foods and drink, it's their problem. We shouldn't be paying for it. But basically, it doesn't really work that way. People just expect the government to be there.
There's very much a sense here that we're all in this together. We're all Swedes. We take care of each other. I am my brother's keeper.
Which sounds very good, but I gotta say, there's a downside to it because it went back to Sweden. In Sweden, everybody has to be the same. Those anti-immigrant parties I talked about, they're reflecting Sweden a few decades back, where everybody had to be the same.
Yeah.
And of course, people coming in from other cultures, they're different. So there's a lot of things happening. People coming in with new cultures, different cultures, and people here have to adjust, and they have to adjust. So there are a lot of things going on, and I hope it's for the better. I hope it's not a powder cake, whatever.
In the minute we have left, is the immigrants? Is this the result of being part of the European Union? It's easier to get into and out of Sweden if you're from another EU country.
I think it's basically the result of the Swedish politicians pushing it that way, EU or not EU. No matter what. And I think Swedish politicians have started looking more towards America. We're becoming more and more like America, actually, the modern sense, all the modern stuff. And of course, America being an immigrant.
Yeah. Except that there's no way that you would have a political party have as a platform, do away with Obamacare, which is just the smallest step toward a national health care system, It's just, or privatize Social Security. George Bush ran, in 2005, when he was reelected, his first priority was to take Social Security and hand it all to Wall Street. I don't think anybody in Sweden would do that.
No, well, the big banks and the big guys, they still run the show over here, actually. Actually, Goldman Sachs is in here, too, so.
Lars Lundeberg, thanks so much, Lars. Thank you.
They're still open.
We'll be back in just a minute. Thom Hartmann here with you. So, is all this a criticism of Mitt Romney actually going to help him come November? Your thoughts next.
Okay.
Let's see what we have here. I had a couple of questions also for Swedes. Does Sweden have a made in Sweden law? Do you know?
I didn't really understand that question. Is that like protectionism or what?
Domestic content. Is there a certain amount of the manufactured goods in the country have to be made here, or if the government buys things, they have to be made here, things like that?
Well, I can say we're less than that. It used to be more like that before, like the borders were really important. Yeah. Now we open up to the European Union a lot, so nowadays it doesn't exist that much.
But you still have industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought a pair of fingernail clippers today here, and they were made in Sweden. You couldn't find a pair of fingernail clippers in America. They're all made in China.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is made in China.
But see, we have Saab and Volvo, the two big car companies, and they've been sold to GM and to Ford.
Yeah.
And lately, the running Swedish government are selling Saab or giving Saab away to China.
Yeah.
And they're almost libertarian in their ways, the government we have right now. They still don't want to lose...
it's a conservative government.
Yeah, but not culturally conservative.
Right.
But they are...
But economically.
Sort of libertarian. Well, in a way. They still want to keep the social safety net.
Yeah.
I kind of like Ron Paul, for telling the truth, even though he's crazy about libertarian stuff. But does somebody actually saying those things? How come... He's the only one.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay. Well, I think I can probably answer that then with what you said, and then I've got to get back to the American stuff. Otherwise, I'll be in big radio trouble. So Lars, thank you so much. You're a marvelous guest. Pleasure talking with you.
Maybe I'll unplug this. You don't get any.
No. You just leave everything as it is right now. Everything's equalized.
Can you write down here?
Sure.
You got power for your